breaking after a startling fall that left fans and cast members in disbelief. Kirk Frost, the once confident and energetic love and hip-hop actor, was found unconscious on set. Witnesses reported seeing a tensive Rion was left wondering what had caused such a dramatic breakdown as emergency. Medical personnel rushed to the scene and quickly transported him to the hospital. However, insiders close to the marriage are now revealing that Kirk has been covertly fighting, making the entire history of his health considerably more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Fans didn't realize that Kirk Frost's struggle was about something more sinister than worry or exhaustion. It has now come to light that Kirk Frost had been secretly doing drugs for months in an attempt to cope with the pressures of his fame and serious personal problems. Rasheeda, his wife, who has always been the family's rock, is now facing the unimaginable. She posted a heartfelt comment on Instagram just hours before Kirk fell. But she quickly took it down after it became too big. Backlash supporters are now left to wonder what drove Kirk to act in this way and how Rasheeda would respond to having her whole life turned upside down. As we uncover the shocking details of Kirk Frost's darkest secret. Stay tuned for the full story. Everyone was in shock when the show's seasoned performer, Kirk Frost, suddenly fell. That morning, the Love and Hip Hop set was as busy as usual, with the actors preparing for yet another day of intense production and the cameras running. Paramedics were immediately called as crew members hurried to his side in a panic. Fans watching from home were transfixed to their televisions, wondering what had happened to the guy who seemed to have overcome all hurdles. Kirk, who had always been the focus of attention, was suddenly lying motionless, his body unresponsive. What truly took everyone off guard. On and off screen were the unsettling stories that started to spread almost immediately after Kirk was admitted to the hospital. As many initially thought, his rapid breakdown was not solely due to the physical trauma of the crash. Rumors began to spread that Kirk was engaged in a covert conflict that was much more perilous than what had ever been captured on camera. Although alarming details about Kirk's private life began to surface from sources close to the couple, no one was aware that Kirk had been coping with an increasing for months. Kirk had been struggling with an unmanageable chemical addiction, keeping his problem hidden from everyone, even his wife Rasheeda, in private. Once a charming, confident husband and father, the man was now a shell of his former self, obsessed by his inner demons. He had always had Rasheeda by his side. His side of the family was not aware that Kirk was keeping such a dark secret from the public. Their marriage was solid, their family was picture perfect. And they had faced challenges together, such as the demands of fame, suspicions of infidelity, and family issues. But this was different. Everything Rasheeda thought she knew about her spouse started to unravel before her very eyes, leaving her in the dark. Kirk's life and health were at stake, not some insignificant quarrel or controversy that could be settled with a public apology. Rasheeda had left a heartfelt note on Instagram posts served as a love letter to her spouse, honoring their years of marriage and expressing gratitude for their shared experience. Fans were confused as to why Rasheeda would take down such a heartfelt statement and what happened between her posting and the collapse that caused her to do so. But it was taken down minutes after it was made public. As the narrative progressed, viewers were left with more questions than answers because the media was always eager to sensationalize a story straight away. Was she aware of what was going on with Kirk? Or was she too focused on being the devoted wife to see the destruction taking place behind closed doors? Seize the drama as the hashtag #KirkFrost collapse went viral in a matter of hours, and fans wanted to know what had happened. They wanted to know if Kirk was taking any kind of medication and how long he had been battling this in secret. Behind the scenes, Rasheeda, their favorite reality star, was in astonishment as her seemingly stable existence imploded before her very eyes. She had overcome numerous challenges, raised their children, worked on her job with Kirk, the lady who had always her life. Work and family was now unable to provide for that she loved, and she was unsure of how to handle this. Kirk's breakdown was just the beginning of a sequence of events that would expose his addiction. Rumors of his secret drug usage began to spread. But no one could have predicted how serious the problem would become. As more details emerged, it became evident that Kirk's addiction had impacted every aspect of his life, including his professional life. The entire Love and Hip Hop family was rocked by Kirk's breakdown. It's more than just his marriage and family. The other cast members who had known Kirk were shocked. Some were devastated while others were outraged. Feeling duped by the man they thought was their friend, Rasheeda had to navigate the emotional agony of discovering her husband's secret while dealing with the public. The fact that Kirk, the man who had spent so much time with them, had fallen so far from grace horrified her. Both Kirk and the system that had enabled him to conceal his addiction for so long were perceived as having betrayed him. After admiring their marriage, many followers began to question everything they had ever heard about the couple. Rasheeda felt great pressure to reconcile the picture of the she loved with the truth that was suddenly becoming apparent. Is their marriage too ruined to be patched in the interim, or could she help him get through this? According to news reports, Kirk had been spotted several times in the weeks before the collapse, appearing disoriented and bewildered. All new information, no matter how dramatic or startling, was being hurriedly reported by the media. There was a lot of speculation, asking whether Kirk's drug usage was a result of something more profound and intimate, or if the pressures of the show, the public scrutiny, the continuous drama, and the fame were what pushed him to this point. Medical staff at the hospital were working to stabilize Kirk's health following his collapse had sparked worries. And the medical team was doing everything they could to find out what had happened. But it was clear it was no isolated incident. Kirk's health had been deteriorating for some time, and the truth would come out. Rasheeda was seen observing. She had been taken aback by Kirk's addiction, but now she had to choose between staying with him and helping him through his therapy or leaving to protect herself and their family. His side in the hospital room was split between perplexity, anger, and despair. Pain. She felt the weight of that decision. And as she waited for replies, the seconds seemed to go on forever. Although Kirk's health improved over the next few hours, the harm had already been done. His breakdown had exposed his addiction, as well as the marital fissures, the unspoken difficulties he had been facing, and the consequences of living a double life. The world now awaited Rasheeda's next move, whether she would stand by her spouse or whether their fairy tale would end. The Frost family was not an exception to the way that hip-hop and love were set to change forever. Fans were earlier mesmerized by Kirk's exaggerated character, felt duped by the man they had been observing on television for years, who had been hiding a darker side. Rumors about Kirk's covert troubles were only exacerbated by the media frenzy that followed his breakdown. Truth, and since Rasheeda was dealing with severe ramifications, they couldn't ignore it. The lady who had always supported their family was suddenly going through a difficult time. She never imagined that Kirk, the man she had lived with, would be struggling with addiction in such a secret and terrible way. She had always thought of him as the solid, trustworthy husband and father who had stood by her side no matter what. But the family they had built and the love they had formed looked to be on the verge of collapse now that everything was uncertain. For Rasheeda, who spent hours at Kirk's hospital bedside as he fought for his recovery, the days that followed were a fog. Seeing him when he was once vibrant and full of energy hurt her heart. But the overwhelming sensation was far more painful. Rasheeda struggled with emotions while the rest of the world watched closely and news outlets covered Kirk's betrayal. She had trusted Kirk with everything, including their marriage, their children, and their future. And now she had to deal with the fact that he had kept this dark secret from her for so long. Social media was ablaze with rumors following his breakdown, and the subsequent revelations about his addiction, and followers were quick to express their opinions. Some criticized Kirk for betraying Rasheeda and their family, while others voiced sympathy for him and raised worries about his health and well-being. The public was divided, and there was a lot of scrutiny as Kirk's addiction became more widely known. New details began to surface. Kirk had been misusing narcotics for months, if not longer, according to those close to the Frost family. The warning indicators had been there, but it was unclear when it started. When friends and coworkers began to speak up, one of the most shocking allegations came from a co-star who had worked closely with Kirk during the Love and Hip Hop filming, while some revealed they had seen Kirk's erratic conduct in private. Others said they had seen him acting suspiciously on set. Source: before his collapse, Kirk had been displaying signs of a substance use disorder for a considerable amount of time. Though he had been able to hide it from everyone, including his closest friends and family, there were times when he was visibly disoriented, unable to focus, and seemed to be disconnected from the outside world. Looking back, it's clear now that something was off with him for a long time. You know, there were days when he couldn't even remember his lines, or he'd zone out in the middle of a scene. We just thought it was burnout, said the anonymous individual. Rasheeda's mental struggle intensified as more information became available, trapping her between the truth and her love for Kirk. It wasn't until everything went apart that everyone grasped the full extent of what he was dealing with. This was a distinct kind of strong, independent lady, something she had always taken pride in, of confronting the inevitable reality that he had been concealing a perilous secret from her. After everything came to light, could she still stand by her husband and forgive him for such a betrayal of her trust? Rasheeda made the profound decision to post a long statement on Instagram amid her emotional crisis, expressing her sorrow, confusion, and agony. Once replete with loving postings about her family and career, her account now served as the background for a much more somber message. "I'm shattered." She said, "I never thought we would be here. Kirk and I have come to terms with Kirk's addiction." It was a cry for understanding and a desperate attempt to explain the situation to her followers and maybe even to herself. "Been through a lot, and I thought we were tough. But now I'm just trying to figure out how we got here and what's ahead for us." The letter attracted a lot of admirers and went viral almost immediately. Rasheeda's supporters immediately responded with messages of support, prayers for Kirk's recovery, and compassion for her suffering after some fans expressed their shock and anger. Accusing Kirk of betraying her and their family, her choice to publicly voice her opinions only seemed to fuel the fires. And Rasheeda removed the message hours after it was posted, with some believing that she had received backlash from her team or Kirk's side of the family, urging her to do so in order to protect their name. There was a noticeable distance between these two, even though Rasheeda remained silent about the incident and was seen going about her business and raising their children in the weeks that followed. It was believed that the intense emotions of the moment had made her rethink her decision to reveal so much to the public. Rasheeda and Kirk had not been seen together since the fall, and rumors circulated that she was considering ending their relationship. Kirk's recovery was slow. He was treated for weeks in the hospital. Family members, friends, and even some of his romantic partners and hip-hop co-stars paid him a visit to offer their support. But the media continued to speculate about the state of his marriage while he sought treatment for his addiction. Despite the fact that the road to recovery was long and the damage done to his marriage and public image was irreversible, it was clear that Kirk's reality started to set in and that the couple's future, both personally and professionally, was in jeopardy, even if it was unclear if Rasheeda would stand by Kirk as he battled to alter his life, or if his addiction was the final straw for her. The pressures of reality TV, the pressure of celebrity, and the weight of his personal issues had all contributed to his collapse, which forced him to face his addiction head-on, something he had been avoiding for years. However, now that he was sitting in Thea, knew that the battle for his life was far from over in the sterile confines of a hospital room, surrounded by medical staff and family members. And Rasheeda was left to pick up the pieces of her broken heart as Kirk entered the next phase of his recovery. Would she be able to forgive him? And more importantly, could she forgive him? One thing was certain: the Frost family would never be the same again. The days following Kirk's collapse were marked by uncertainty, and public scrutiny only grew as more details about his battle with addiction became available. The world eagerly awaited answers as their marriage survived. The devastation caused by his addiction, like Rasheeda's silence, was deafening. And the fractures in her emotional armor were becoming harder to hide, despite the fact that she had become a figure of resilience to her admirers, who now began to question how much longer she could handle the strain of the situation. Intense media attention, Rasheeda largely concealed her true feelings, supporting Kirk during his recovery on the outside, but struggling to understand that the once loving couple was now estranged, and that every conversation felt increasingly awkward on the inside compared to the last. And when Rasheeda would pay Kirk a visit in the hospital, she would occasionally sit quietly by his bed and watch as he began to gradually regain his strength, his once bright personality fading into a ghost of what Rasa had always prided herself on: being a strong, independent woman. But the emotional roller coaster she was going through was pushing her boundaries, and the trust they had built over the years now seemed dubious. It used to be, but even in these moments of reflection, there was a tension beneath the surface. Rasheeda continued to question whether their marriage would survive the storm. The media never stopped. The taboos were relentless, and Kirk was scrutinized by both fans and detractors. His once gilded reputation had suffered a severe blow, and many of his former supporters began to turn against him. Social media was rife with opposing opinions. Some defended him, claiming that he was just another victim of the demands of fame, while others attacked him, calling him reckless and self-centered, implying that his every move was being observed. And even an anonymous source close to the Frost family disclosed startling information. One morning that shocked everyone to their core: Kirk had been struggling with addiction for far longer than anyone had anticipated. And this revelation was frightening. The press exploited even the slightest error. According to the source, many people, including Rasheeda, were shocked to learn that Kirk's addiction had begun in their early marriage, but had remained hidden for years. Rasheeda had never thought Kirk was carrying such a heavy burden. He had kept his habit under wraps, while balancing his responsibilities as a husband, father, and reality TV star. But as his personal life and career demands grew, so did his drug dependence, which resulted in an addiction that started. Rasheeda had always trusted her husband in their love and life together. So this new insight was like a strike in the gut. The once confident and ambitious man who had created a life with her was now a shell of himself, struggling against something much stronger than he had ever dreamed of. After years of deceit and deception, they had developed a connection, but now she had to confront the awful reality that everything she had ever known was built on lies. How could she ever trust him again? How could they rebuild their relationship? Rasheeda revealed the depth of her emotional pain in a private conversation with close friends, saying she was lost and uncertain about her and her family's future. She had been there for Kirk for years, sharing all the highs and lows of their reality TV journey together, but now she had to make the decision Topapool don't understand. With tears in her eyes, Rasheeda told her friends, "I gave him everything I had, including my family, my heart, and my trust. But now I'm not sure if I can keep doing this. In what way can I?" However, Rasheeda felt divided and didn't want to burden herself with it. Her friends reminded her that she had every right to feel the way she did, that her happiness and health were just as essential as Kirk's recovery, and that she didn't have to shoulder the burden of everything alone. Although Kirk was undergoing extensive therapy, it was clear that his battle was far from over, even as his recuperation progressed. Though she knew she couldn't desert him in his time of need, She also realized she couldn't keep risking her health for a relationship that had been marred by so many lies. One of Kirk's former pals, who had seen firsthand his difficulties, his attempts to deal with the root of his addiction and discover healthy coping techniques without using drugs, in an exclusive interview with the gossip blog. The damage to his marriage and reputation continued even after he made progress. This insider, who had known Kirk for years, claimed that the reality star had been turning to narcotics to cope with the pressures of his company and marriage, and that as his addiction worsened in recent months, he became increasingly reclusive, in addition to the demands of being a reality TV personality. The acquaintance explained that Kirk had never told anyone about his deeper emotional challenges, which were the root of his drug issues. According to the buddy, Kirk has always been a proud man who kept many items to conceal his difficulties. Rasheeda began to show signs of emotional exhaustion as the weeks passed. She kept supporting Kirk during his recovery, but it was becoming increasingly clear that it was having an impact on her, so she began to stay away from public events. Rasheeda started to concentrate more on her job and threw herself into her business activities, introducing new goods and projects to recover some control over her life. As those who had previously praised her for her power and grace started to worry about her well-being. Additionally, she postponed appearances and increased her time spent reflecting an effort to distract herself from the chaos in her personal life. But Kirk's addiction continued to be a worry even when her job was successful. The pain of the betrayal she had endured lingered no matter how hard she tried to focus on her task. Kirk recognized that repairing his marriage would be the most challenging aspect of his path, and that Rasheeda's forgiveness would not come, despite the fact that he was attending therapy sessions and support groups and making a concerted effort to rebuild the trust he had lost willingly. And he saw that he had hurt her deeply, and that he would have to prove to her that he was worth the struggle. Kirk expressed his contrition for the pain he had caused and his determination to put things right in a meaningful conversation with his family. He continued, his voice trembling with passion. "I know I've messed up, but I'm not giving up. I love Rasheeda, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." Despite his heartfelt apologies, Rasheeda remained wary, thinking that their relationship might never be able to be resolved. The fractured trust was also hard to repair. But she still loved Kirk in her heart, and that love was what saved her from abandoning him as he sought treatment. Despite the media circus surrounding his addiction never ceasing, time would tell. But for now, the world was focused on whether Kirk and Rasheeda could save their marriage or whether it was truly over. As the press closely examined and analyzed every new development and update, the media, as usual, was focused on the details of Kirk and Rasheeda's personal lives, with both fans and critics forming their own opinions about their relationship as the weeks stretched into months. Watching to see if the Frost family could rise above the scandal's ashes and find a way to move on. Everyone had an opinion on the future of the Frost family. Some thought Rasheeda would eventually leave Kirk and move on, while others hoped for a miraculous recovery and reconciliation. Whatever the audience's opinion, Rasheeda had to make a choice that only she could support. As their home was closed, Rasheeda's emotions were confused, and she spent sleepless nights wondering if she should go and start over, or stay and help Kirk start over. She had given him everything, but now everything had changed. The betrayal was so profound that, despite her sympathy for him, she could not help but see the enormous void that had been left in their marriage. Kirk, on the other hand, was making every effort to heal, attending regular therapy sessions and support groups, and seeking atonement in any way he could. "I'm sorry," Kirk would say when they were alone. "I never intended to cause you such pain. I will try my best to restore the pain. Trust between us because I love you." Rasheeda continued to be aloof in spite of his efforts. And he realized why he had destroyed it when he said, "I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the man you deserve." Rasheeda's response was often one of silence, as she had already been through a lot and wasn't sure if she could keep believing in him. because the emotional wounds were still raw and the pain of his betrayal returned every time she saw him. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Rasheeda confided in her close friends. Over lunch, but this was too much. Could she really forgive them? Could their marriage last this long? For the first time in weeks, Rasheeda had not shed a tear, and her friends, who had always admired her courage, saw a side of her that few had ever seen. They listened, offering support and advice, but they also made it clear that Rasheeda had to prioritize her own happiness. One of her friends remarked quietly, "You've always supported everyone else. But now you need to consider if the emotional toll this relationship is taking on you is worth it. Are you staying out of obligation or because you love him?" Rasheeda had always put her family first, and Kirk had been a big part of that. But it seemed as though her family was falling apart, and there was no way to patch things up without causing her a lot of pain. Kirk had relapsed a couple of times and turned to his old habits for solace when the strain of reality TV and his failing marriage became too much. His recuperation continued in the interim, albeit with some obstacles. As he became aware of how terrible his mistakes were, his remorse increased with each lapse. He couldn't control his addiction, and we were jeopardizing his prospects of recovery. The cycle of recovery and relapse seemed to go on forever. Kirk turned to his previous family members and acquaintances for assistance. And he started attending, sought out individual therapy sessions, and even sought the advice of a spiritual counselor in an effort to have a deeper understanding of his addiction. But he secretly understood that the true battle was not just about breaking free from drug use, but also about repairing his relationship with Rasheeda, which was growing more and more estranged from his public persona. Kirk was also beginning to shift. Some followers were positive and applauded his efforts to receive help and regain his life, while others were less sympathetic because the media was unkind and continuously bringing up his past wrongdoings. Kirk Frost, a man destroyed by addiction. And will Rasheeda ever forgive Kirk? Were the most popular headlines in gossip columns. And readers appeared to take pleasure in the drama as they made predictions about the couple's future. Kirk had to cope with something that was causing him needless stress. Although Kirk had seen similar remarks previously, this one seemed especially potent. He saw a post from a fan who had been following their trip for years one evening. While looking through social media, the message was clear, but Rasheeda deserves better than to be eliminated. It was different. It wasn't just any critic. It was a fan who had supported him before. He was disturbed by the comment and felt guilty for letting Rasheeda and everyone who had previously trusted him down. But he was aware that the only strategy to put things right was told how. He was unable to undo the damage he had caused. He could strive daily to better himself and demonstrate to Rasheeda and their supporters that he had changed. It was his actions, not his words, that made it possible began to distance herself from the spotlight. She seldom shared anything on Instagram anymore, and when she did, it was often vague and mysterious. Once outspoken and candid, the reality star had become more private, and her posts now had a hint of sadness. One night, she revealed a fan speculated that, although the photograph was quickly taken down, the damage had already been done. She was sitting alone at her home, staring out at the city skyline with the remark, "Sometimes the hardest part of healing is letting go." Rasheeda's emotional message caused a rift in public opinion. Some admirers acknowledged her hardships and sympathized with her, while others attacked her for sharing too much personal information, arguing that it was unjust. Rasheeda was more concerned with her own recovery, which had become more difficult as the strain increased. And Kirk was also facing the reality of the situation, so she didn't care what other people thought. Kirk and her kids persisted in sharing their struggles with the world, although he was battling his addiction and personal demons. He was aware that both his rehabilitation and his marriage were in jeopardy. Every stride he took seemed to be followed by 2 steps back, and it was harder and longer than he had ever thought. Rasheeda was becoming impatient. Even though he had done everything he could to make things right, there was no guarantee that she would ever fully forgive him, and the Frost family was forced to deal with the most difficult time of their lives while the public watched. Had their love reached a breaking point, or would they make it through this? Given Kirk's ongoing addiction to celebrity and dishonesty, it would be hard to say whether Kirk and Rasheeda would get back together, or if their relationship would worsen. Every new headline added to the emotional toll. Rasheeda had been patient, but the quiet between them seemed to grow louder every day. Her troubles were an emotional roller coaster. Kirk's commitment to his recuperation was evident. But every time she looked at him, she couldn't shake the sensation that they were drifting more apart. It was as if they were in two separate universes. In one world, Rasheeda had to gather up the shards of their shattered reality as Kirk battled his problems. Rasheeda, who was once the epitome of strength, began to question her own resilience and her ability to help Kirk. Because of his addiction, her mind couldn't deny the damage Kirk's actions had created, but her heart wept for the future they had once dreamed of together. Rasheeda had a moment of introspection during which she considered the unthinkable. Could she keep pretending everything was fine? She was at a crossroads, torn between love and hate, and although she had always trusted the pledges they had made to each other through good times and bad, the weight of those words suddenly seemed like a burden. It was weird and terrible to think about leaving the man she had previously referred to as her soulmate. Self-preservation. Kirk continued his therapy by signing up for a new, more comprehensive rehabilitation program that emphasized holistic healing. In addition to his addiction, he was working hard to mend the strained bond between him and his family. Despite his dedication, Kirk found himself questioning whether it was too late, whether Rasheeda had already died, and whether he would ever be able to make up for the pain he had given her. He wondered if they were still in love, which kept him up at night. The media, always hungry for drama, continued to feed the fires with new reports, each more absurd than the last. But they were strong enough to survive the storm they had been through, while some suggested Rasheeda had already moved on to someone else. Others claimed Kirk had relapsed once more, was more complicated. In reality, their situation was a quiet conflict that happened behind closed doors, out of sight of the general public. Rasheeda posted an enigmatic remark on Instagram one day after a heartfelt conversation. Healing is a journey, not a destination. Sometimes it's hard to know when to let go. Fans showered her with supportive and worried remarks after she published a post that stunned her followers. Rasheeda's marriage was the subject of more inquiries than ever before. Was she really thinking about quitting it, or what? Was she just talking about her own healing process, separate from Kirk's struggles? Rasheeda remained silent and shunned interviews and public appearances in the days that followed. She appeared to be absorbing things in secret, as evidenced by her subdued demeanor. Kirk, who was always the more vocal one, was now relegated to the background. Despite his best efforts to support his family, he felt isolated due to his struggle with addiction and the stress on his marriage. Even though his family and friends rallied behind him, he was aware of the way in order to recover control. Rasheeda focused more on her business ventures at this period and gave her all to her work. It was freeing to focus her energies on something positive. She had always been a strong, self-reliant lady. She gave hints about herself. The process of redemption would be unclear and time-consuming. Despite the challenges in her personal life, Rasheeda was adamant about continuing in the business world. However, the question, would she leave Kirk, the guy she had once completely trusted, or would she continue with him? New social media initiatives and her supporters' attention increased. The tension. Kirk was trying hard to stay hopeful, but the uncertainty was overwhelming him. He couldn't deny that Rasheeda's love and faith in him had been shattered, and he was aware that his actions had consequences. Although the family remained split, some members banded together to help Kirk. Some were more harsh, saying that it was time for him to deal with the consequences of his actions, while others offered him the assistance he needed to heal. Rasheeda was the only one who had to make the difficult choice of whether or not to follow her own opinion. even though everyone else had theirs. As more things happen behind the scenes, it becomes clear that this is a tale and the tension remains. Hi, will Rasheeda be able to forgive Kirk? Or is the harm too great to be undone? In the final minutes of the story, the Frost's destiny remains undetermined. That's not even close to being done. Do you believe that Kirk and Rasha's love is doomed? Or would they weather this storm together? Kindly leave your remarks in the space provided below. Additionally, don't forget to follow for the latest information on your story, like, and subscribe for more updates as this drama unfolds. Favorite celebrities and return often to see what happens next in this incredibly moving